I never thought I was going to feel as at home as I feel now.
Hola a todos. Nunca creí que me iba a sentir tan en mi casa como me siento ahora.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the organizers who have made this evening possible. It is an honor for me to be here and receive the Tyson Award for Economic Reform on this day. For those who do not know me, I am an economist who has been honored with the task of leading the destiny of my country. Throughout my life, I have been a lover of economic theory, and the facts, the theory, and my own history have led me to embrace the ideas of the Austrian school of economics and, in particular, the ideas of freedom. As such, my commitment to the ideas of freedom, that is, to the defense of the right to life, to freedom and to property, is indisputable. And is a result of having lived the majority of my adult life in a country consumed by socialism. Being honored with this distinction fills me with pride. I have already said on other occasions that socialism is a disease of the soul that attacks and corrodes the human being in its fundamental values. And if you do not face it, it leads to misery, as happened in my country. However, the silent majority are waking up, and as a result, the course of history is changing. Today I am honored with the Titan distinction of economic reform, and I must say that the title is really right, since the task that we are carrying out in Argentina since a year ago is truly titanic. Not only because of the dimension, the depth and complexity of the reforms that we are carrying out, but also because we must fight against the extortion and sabotage of corporate interests enshrined in the power of the old regime. That is why I want to take the opportunity to share with you some ideas about what we are doing, which some are already calling the Argentine miracle. There are also some fallacies of traditional politics, because the battle is long and we need the right intellectual tools to win it. First of all, our battle is against the ideas of gradualism. The Argentines are used to disappointment. It is the product of having lived in a country infected by socialism for 100 years. There have been dictatorships and democratic governments, but the only constant has been collectivism in some of its forms. There have also been, it is true, reformist experiences, but until now all of them have failed. None had been able to make the transition from the impoverished collectivism to the redemptive capitalism of the poor. This cycle of illusions and failure for decades has caused many Argentines to choose to emigrate if they had the possibility, or to be content with surviving if they did not have it. This has been repeated practically throughout the 20th century, with the consequence of the destruction of wealth and capital that it implied, characterizing what we have called the century of Argentine humiliation. Coalitions of governments that had been chosen to implement reforms in Argentina quickly failed, and the vicious circle began again. The question that many made over decades was why have reformist coalitions failed in Argentine history? The reason is simple. Until now, no government, with the exception of the government of Dr. Carlos Menem, if one once had dared to apply the recipe of liberalism without fear. This happens because of fear of losing support, fear of breaking agreements, fear of social protests, or of losing the next elections. This is because politicians, regardless of their party, have as their first mandate to remain in power at any cost. They only then think about making the changes they have promised. In the same way that a businessman seeks a maximization of the utilities of his company, A politician as a main driver in the face of anything else, maximizing the amount of time that is in power and the size of the budget that he manages. It is because of this fear of losing support that they accommodate their ideas to keep them, such that it gives them tranquility. Wrongly, that this way they will stay in power longer. As such, under whatever excuse, even those who want to make changes or reforms opt for reforms that stop gradualism, which inexorably end up failing. This paradox is interesting. We could call it the paradox of the reformist politician. Convinced that the most important thing for a country to change is its permanence in power, it produces its own failure. Well, we are reformists, but we are not politicians. We do not operate under the premise that what is most important is our permanence and power. But for us, the most important thing is to implement our reforms. We govern without fear, applying sharp measures to generate confidence in society and in the market. Not only because those are our convictions, but because empirical evidence also accompanies us. For 1952 onwards, all these sharp programs, including the one in 1959, were expansive in activity and employment, and all gradualist programs ended badly. Second, we do not compromise with the enemy. The other fallacy that reformist politicians tend to apply is the fallacy of consensus. Most of the reformist experience is clash against the political class, who tell them that they must compromise their reforms with them. However, if the politicians that one faces represent an ideology set against them, then they do not have the right to do so. There may never be an agreement between good and evil because we work for opposite interests. You cannot negotiate the terms of a reform with those who live by preserving one's privileges. Between good and evil because we work for opposing interests. It is not possible to negotiate the terms of a reform with those who live to preserve their privileges. On the other hand, thirdly, it is necessary to deal simultaneously with both the urgent and the important. We assume in an absolutely critical context, knowing that the urgent was to stabilize the economy, that the important thing was to disarm the collectivist leviathan that had been mounted in Argentina during the last 100 years. That is why our second measure in economic matter had to do not with the urgent, but with the important. The Decree 7023 was the beginning of a set of structural reforms that will undoubtedly open our markets and will bring us closer to the rest of the world, and it is already doing that. In the short time of this decree, we sent the bill based on the Congress, which together represents a reform of the state 8 times larger than the one carried out by the government of Carlos Saúl Menem. That is, we made the largest structural reform in all of Argentina's history, rewinding 123 years of decadence. That is, we not only worry about the urgent, which was to stabilize the economy, but we also embody the most ambitious reform project in the history of our country. We did it all at the same time because the urgent is not justifiable to postpone the important. Fourth point, and above all very important on a global level, to weaken the state. The idea that I want to leave you with is that reform in the state implies returning power that was taken away from the citizenry. And the only way to do it is by shrinking the state. There is no other. I say this in response to those who advocate for a great but efficient state. I know it may sound nice or well-intentioned, but believe me, when a politician tells them he wants an efficient state, he is advocating for better mechanisms to steal the wealth from the citizens. The only acceptable state is the smallest possible. To return to the taxpayer what is his and end the sale of favors. There is no better method than to eliminate state bureaucracy. so that the possibility of selling those favors does not exist. The life of the people cannot be subject to the criteria of a bureaucrat behind the counter. Deregulation is the only successful path. It is the path of the chainsaw. It is the path of the land. Because a state that develops tasks that do not compete with it ends up not fulfilling its basic responsibilities. As Murray Neaton Rothbard said, the inventor of anarcho-capitalism, the bigger the state, the less resources will be used to satisfy the desires of consumers who have contributed to the production, and more resources will be used to satisfy the desires of consumers who do not produce, that is, the parasites, the friends of politicians. Finally, even having made all the changes we have made in this first year of government, which has also been considered almost univocally as an absolute success, since we have achieved in the first year the fiscal surplus in 123 years, we have lowered wholesale inflation from 54% to 0.8%. We have reduced poverty from 55% to 38% in a year. We already have better levels of activity in growth than when we assumed. And we have just been in government for a year. In addition, Decree 7023 and the Basic Law have only been the tip of the iceberg. We still have 3,200 structural reforms ahead of us, because our goal is arduous but simple. We want to make Argentina the freest country in the world. Because we know that freedom generates prosperity. Because we know that our ideas work. Because we have proven it throughout this year. This has only been the beginning. The best is yet to come. And I also want to thank you for this recognition. May God bless each and every one of you and the Argentinians. Let us once again thank Argentina and the United States. And may the force of heaven be with us. Long live freedom, Tema. Thank you very much. Thanks, here.